Welcome back to my channel. As you can see in the lamest intro ever, we like to dig deep on this channel. We like to explore avenues of conversation that sometimes aren't so much talked about. And here on this channel, we like to swim against the stream somewhat. We're going to do some deep dives on various subject matters here, and no subject matter is out of bounds here. If somebody wants to talk about something and I think it's a really interesting subject matter, then that's what we're going to do. And if that takes 45 minutes or an hour and a half or 2.5 hours, that's what we're going to do on this channel. We're going to talk today about reality and what is reality. Can we manifest our reality? Are we living in a simulation? Are we living in the Matrix? Everything you've been told is a lie. That's pretty much the focus of today's conversation. And what better chap to do that with somebody that a lot of you will know in YouTube world. His name is Paul Wallace. He has a very, very open mind, and today we're going to approach a subject matter that he's been really interested in over the last, let's say, 18 months to 2 years. It's a subject matter that is of great interest to people, I feel, because you know what, over the last few years and with the advent of the internet and everything, people are questioning their reality somewhat. People are questioning, where do we come from? Where did it all start?
Where did we come from? Where do we go? Where did we come from, Joe?
Not that channel, Jim. This is a serious channel. You know what, when we start talking about certain subjects, some people go absolutely mental. Or some people close their ears, they refuse to listen. Now, I'm not going to give any strong opinions on any of these subject matters that we're going to approach. I'm going to leave that to my guests. But at the very least, we're going to dig deep on these subject matters. We're going to do a deep dive, and we're going to try and make a little sense out of it. I'm sure we're going to probably end up leaving more questions than answers. That's really what I want to do today. I want to explore all this kind of thing and see if there's any truth in it, and see where we go with this. So today's deep dive is about reality. What is reality? How do we manifest reality? And can we change our own reality? It's pretty interesting for me. So let's get straight into it, and let's go talk to Paul Wallace. We're going to go to my garden of truth. Let's call it the Truth Garden, a place where I take people and get the truth out of them. Let's see. I'm not going to offer any strong opinions on these things, as I'd love you guys to be able to do that and have a little debate yourselves. No mass debate going on here, just a normal debate, seriously. So whilst we're not mass debating, we're just debating usually, just normally between ourselves in the comments, because today in particular and in the future, there are going to be some controversial subjects, and there are going to be some subject matter that you strongly agree with, and there's going to be a lot that you very much disagree with. If you like intelligent, out there conversation, you're going to love it. We're going to dig deep today into some very interesting subject matter. Join me in the Garden of Truth. What I'd love to speak to you about, I know it's something that fascinates you greatly.
Okay.
Is reality in general. A lot of things come to mind, don't they? Such as the Matrix. Are we in a simulation?
Right.
And that sort of thing. What's your take on the whole? What is reality, Paul?
Okay. Yeah, you're right. You're right about one thing. It's something that interests me, and to be quite honest with you, the last 18 months was pretty jaw-dropping for me to take on board these concepts and to go with them, you know, about what is reality, you know. Let's go back to the basic narrative that we're told at school. Yeah, you and I, we were taught that, you know, there are molecules and there are atoms, and around these atoms there's a nucleus and a proton and a neutron or an electron that spins around them. Right. Yeah. And so matter is just a whole bunch of these atoms vibrating at a certain frequency. And, you know, even if when you touch something and it's hard, there's actually although it sounds crazy, there's actually really hardly anything there, but other than a little bit of information.
Right.
Yeah. So this is what I've always believed, and what I think most people are taught. And you have a three-dimensional arena with space and time, time and space, and the typical view was this: the brain, with all its billions of neurons, creates conscious experiences. Yeah. And that's it. And when you die, that's the end of the brain, and therefore that's the end of your consciousness. Well, I don't subscribe to that now at all. I mean, I've never subscribed to that in terms of when you die, that's it. I've always believed that we are beings of light. We are eternal beings of light.
Okay.
But when you grapple with the hard problem of consciousness, a guy called Don Hoffman, he's cutting edge, I would say, particle physicist, and he's teamed up with some math guys, and he's come up with some pretty amazing stuff.
Regarding?
Well, you know about the split. Do you know about the double split experiment?
I'm pretty sure you explained it to me once, but if you could explain it again. Please.
Okay, well, they fire these protons, light beams, yeah, through these two slits, and you would expect on the wall behind it that there would be a couple of lines, but there's not. It's spread all across the whole wall. Now, the jaw-dropping thing about the double split experiment is this, right? The outcome is changed when it's observed. The outcome changes when you observe the experiment. And that's been proved pretty conclusively. Science has yielded to that, yes. Somehow or other, the act of looking at something changes the outcome of this particular experiment.
Is that like back to the age-old question, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around, is there a sound? Is it a similar sort of concept or not?
Kind of. Well, the best way I could describe it is this. Anything outside of your vision right now, yeah, or anything outside of my vision right now, for the observer, that's for you or for me, it's in what's called a superposition state, right? And that means all those particles are everywhere they could possibly be until you look at them, right?
Okay.
Now, that's not to say that tree there, if I don't look at it, that's not to say the tree doesn't exist. The information is there, and when somebody else looks at it, they will see the tree. What's happening is the light is going from a wave function, and when you look at it, it collapses into particles. Okay. Now you talked earlier about simulation. Well, let's take Grand Theft Auto as an example. Yeah, one of these online games.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
And you're playing that with somebody from the US and somebody from Europe. Yeah, real-time game online. And you look to your right and you see a red Ferrari. Yeah. Well, maybe when the other guy looks to his left, he'll see your red Ferrari. The red Ferrari doesn't exist. We know that. It doesn't exist. But there's a supercomputer that's running the simulation, and when you look at it, it has to render it, which it does instantly. So, in the same way that is a simulation, according to Don Hoffman and a few other guys, that's what happens in reality.
That's an interesting concept, Paul. I must admit, before I came to see you and I knew we were going to talk about certain things in general, I googled, one of the things I googled is are we living in a simulation?
Right.
I must admit I was surprised by the results, just in terms of the sheer volume of hits that I got, and the pages of
Right.
people discussing it or believing that we indeed are in a simulation. I think a lot of people are going that way somewhat. What makes you feel that way? Did you have the feeling first, or did you watch something and think?
Well, quantum mechanics raised my interest. I had no interest in science really at all, especially physics, you know. We're all bound by Newton's laws and all of that, you know, and the theory of relativity and everything else. And those rules apply, I believed, in the whole universe, until you get to subatomic level, and then the game totally changes. Totally changes.
Why?
Because the laws of physics, as we know them, are no longer relevant.
Are they flawed or just totally irrelevant?
A few years ago, it was the 100th anniversary of Einstein's theory of relativity. And Donald Hoffman, who is also a physicist, he gave a talk on the anniversary of that 100 year. And he said, you know, we have so much to thank Einstein for. His theory of relativity, the other stuff he did, and everything else. And he said, and the great thing about theories is they all have limits. He said, now we have discovered that once you get down to the size on the Planck scale, right, 34 to the minus 34 centimeters, that's it, yeah. Planck scale minus 34 centimeters. Time and space do not exist. They're not relevant anymore. They're totally out of the game.
Okay.
So what he's saying is, physicists around the world have thought, you know, we're only a little bit away from understanding all of it, you know, getting the theory of everything. And he says, but no. We know that we can only see 0.05% of what's there. He now believes, and lots of other people do too, that basically our consciousness is looking through a cheap headset. That's what he calls it, a cheap headset. Yeah? Now, it's a bold statement to say that time and space is doomed. But that's what he says, and that's what all the other top guys say. Time and space is not fundamental. This is where we've been going down the wrong road, according to Hoffman, because we thought to ourselves, okay, we know about 3 dimensions, we know about space-time, so that they are the fundamentals of reality. Well, no, they're not, according to certain people.
Okay.
That's pretty profound. Yeah.
And how, for a layman such as myself, or anybody watching this trying to get their heads around it, how would it manifest itself? When you think about living in a simulation, I think about a few things. I think about computer simulation, computer code, the evidence thereof. I know certainly I used to walk about in my 20s and I always used to tell people, it doesn't matter, live today, it's just a game
right,
show.
Yeah.
Now, is there any evidence or have people seen anything that suggests that it really is a simulation? Is there code or?
Yes, somebody has found digital code in our DNA.
Okay.
Definitely. Now here's the thing. Donald Hoffman says this, right? He says, look, I understand the particle physics people. You know, I'm one myself. And I know how difficult it is for them to let go of space-time as being fundamental. And many of them are studying consciousness, because consciousness is actually what's fundamental,
right, okay.
Not time-space or space-time. Right? They're studying consciousness. And he said, and for the last however many years it has gone by, not one of them can come up with a theory of how a person might experience the taste of chocolate, the taste of vanilla, the smell of bacon. Like nothing can be done. So he said, what we've got to do is we've got to forget about the space-time fundamentality of it all. We've got to start looking outside of space-time, because consciousness is the key. And and it's pretty exciting stuff. So we all render our whole world between our ears, yeah.
Yeah.
And yes, of course, you're going to see the same thing as somebody else if it's there, but it only exists for you when you look at it. In much the same way as if you've got 11 tabs open on a Google browser, yeah?
Yep.
Well, you've got all these things going on, but it'll only render the one you're looking at, yeah? It won't render anything else.
What makes...
It doesn't need to render anything else.
Okay.
That's another reason why I think we are in a simulation, because it's following the same kind of rules that a simulation follows. In other words, you only render what the player can see.
Okay.
Because otherwise it could never work, you know. There's no computer on this planet that could render the whole of a game like Grand Theft Auto and just have it there in the background. They render on the fly. And we, as human beings, our consciousness renders on the fly.
It's a very interesting concept, actually, Paul.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I think that most people have considered, at least a couple of times, they've considered the idea that we may be in some kind of matrix, we may be in some kind of simulation, and people take it different ways. For example, there was a guy many years ago, I know you're familiar with him, when he first burst onto the scene, he was...
I burst onto the scene, didn't I? And I was going to be the next best thing.
Probably by myself as well. He was labelled a lunatic, mate. Okay. He came on a Terry Wogan show in the 80s, dressed in a shell suit, proclaiming to be the son of God.
Mr. Ike.
Yeah,
yes.
the ex-Hereford United goalkeeper. And I'm not being disparaging, or I'm not sort of...
Yeah.
When he came out, I thought, wow, what a lunatic. And I'm still not myself fully on side with him at all. But what I will concede straight off the bat is that he said certain things a long time ago that have come true or turned out to be true. Now, so in terms of this simulation, I caught something on the True Geordie podcast where he mentioned that I don't even think he thinks the moon is real, it's a simulation and stuff like that. But how far would you go on it? How do you think it manifests itself? Are we a complete computer simulation, or are we... You could say,
couldn't you, that our reality is rendered on the fly for each of us. Yeah, and there are other eye-opening things that happen. I watched a short video of this scientist. This is amazing, Jim. Right, he's got sand on a metal plate, and he starts playing sounds at different tones. And when he gets to 405, I think it is megahertz, all the sand turns into beautiful patterns. And then he goes up a bit higher and they all disappear, the patterns, until he gets to another one which might be 450, and again this beautiful pattern appears. Another man, he put water under a microscope, a glass of water, after speaking lovingly to it. And the patterns were just amazing. Then he spoke nastily to it, bad, you know, and there was just no pattern at all. So you know, these kind of things, they make you think, well, okay, just how much of an influence do we have on reality? How much do we have? It's an exciting time to be alive. Indeed. For the first time ever, physicists will sit down at a table with, what do you call them? The guys, the philosophers. They'll sit down and engage in dialogue with philosophers, because they now realize that, the human consciousness is fundamental.
So I think,
it's fundamental. It's fundamental. It's fundamental. It's fundamental.
It's actually really interesting what you just said there about sound, because I've seen a few people discussing things, and I've read various articles about the possibility of various frequencies, various sounds having effects on things, including maybe even the movement of objects. And I believe it's been proven that very light objects can certainly be moved. There's even been suggestion that sound and frequency and stuff was used a long time ago to lift heavy objects. Some people suggest that ancient megaliths around the world and some constructions, etc., that are put together perfectly could have been done this way. What's your thought on the sound being able to sort of, not just with the patterns, but do you think frequencies can influence things in a greater manner?
Well, the way I see it is this: around about the Middle Ages, we had more spirituality than we do now. Yeah, and people could do amazing things, and those in control didn't want that. So burnt at the stake and all that. But if you look at societies coming through the years, it's all been pushed away.
When you say that, are you specifically talking about people maybe with different abilities involving perhaps the pineal gland?
Yes, yes.
People who could cure things using different methods and herbs.
There was an American millionaire, and I can't for the life of me remember his name, Rockefeller I think it was. In the 1920s, Rockefeller approached every single university in the US and said, I'm going to support you financially, but you're going to teach pharmaceutical-based healing. No natural healing whatsoever. And this was a very clever plan, because the pharmaceutical industry was just an idea in his head at the time. And his business model was, well, let's make people sick and cure them with drugs. Now, it's only been in the last few years, and this is largely due to the internet, that natural healing and anything natural regarding energies and powers are coming to light now. And so I think basically we have a latent talent or inbuilt ability to manifest things, to use this power, but it's been suppressed. It's been suppressed.
Indeed, but what about the actual sort of, I know people have the ability to sort of channel various things and use the third eye and whatnot, but I'm thinking about things that are perhaps already there, such as frequencies and stuff.
Yes.
I believe that they're probably there naturally somewhere, and we perhaps are recreating these frequencies to make. I don't know. What do you feel about that?
Tesla said something that I think is right on point. He said everything is about energy and vibration. Everything. Yeah. Now, I believe that all animals are conscious. All living things are conscious. And that goes for trees, anything. I believe they're all conscious in their own way. I believe the planet is conscious in its own way.
Okay.
And if you were to ask me about, the meaning of life, one theory I have is that there is an ultimate force for good. Some people might call it God, Some people might call it the unified field, yeah? And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, maybe this unified field wanted to experience life in so many different ways that it split itself up into tiny little pieces, and you and I are just a couple of those tiny little pieces that are experiencing a three-dimensional life on this planet in this density. And our goal is to learn, and we're given free will. I believe we've been here hundreds of times, you and I. Reincarnation, I believe in it. It's a Buddhist thing, but there are so many examples, recorded examples of young children who could speak fluent Chinese, and they took this boy to the village, and his wife was still alive, and he told her something at the age of 8 years that only her husband would have known. And there's all kinds of recorded cases of that go to prove reincarnation.
So what you're saying there then really, I think, is that the concept of having a soul, right?
Yeah.
And then the soul lives on, so
yep.
The soul would obviously leave the body.
Yep.
Have you got, I know this question's just popped in my head, where do you think the soul would go in between vessels, or do you think...
Back to the unified force.
Okay.
Back to the unified force.
And then...
And I think out-of-body experiences, I mean, I've had two, right? Out-of-body experiences give you a taste of what it's like to be in that dimension. And regarding that, I'd be interested to know how many of your viewers have ever had either an out-of-body experience or a near-death experience, because according to the stats that I've seen, it's something like 1 in 5. Have you ever left your body, Jim?
No, I don't think so. I've had some very, very vivid dreams.
Right.
Perhaps about doing something like that, but no, I never have. No.
Well, there is a theory, and I kind of subscribe to this, that every night when we go to sleep, our higher self, our spiritual self, goes off on the astral planes. Yeah, and perhaps a dream is a memory of that. If you were to ask me, what is the most valuable thing that I have in my life, I would say without a shadow of a doubt, I have absolutely no fear of death. Now, out-of-body experiences, let's talk about out-of-body experiences. I've had 2, and that was a game changer for me. Once I had the second one, I decided to do some research, and I did some research, and I thought, okay, it happens to a lot of people. Actually, the stats say roughly 1 in 5 of every human being will have an out-of-body experience at least one time in their life. So I then got to the stage, well, I know I go on after death. And there's a lot of difference between belief and knowing. If 1,000 people told me about their out-of-body experience, I'd believe them, but I don't know. I don't know if it would happen to me even. So it's the knowing. You've got to know. Once you know, it's like a huge burden from your shoulders. I used to be terrified of dying. Holy fuck. I couldn't imagine this world without me in it. I just could not. So what I'm saying is, if you've got an open mind and you'd like to actually find out for yourself all about, out-of-body experiences, then I would recommend that you check out a guy called Robert Monroe. Now, Robert Monroe, in the 1960s, Robert Monroe was a very successful businessman. He had a couple of big businesses going. He was a very smart guy, and he was an engineer. And one night, he's in his 50s, I think, when this happened, he left his body. He opened his eyes and he could see all these bits of glass right by his face. And he thought to himself, what the hell is that? And he kind of turned over and saw himself on the bed with his wife, and frightened him to death, thought he was dying, and he went back to his body. He wanted to know what's going on, obviously. And after his initial fear had kind of calmed down a bit, he went and saw a few doctors. 4 or 5 specialists he went to see, and the best advice he got is, well, there's nothing wrong with you. We've checked you over. There's nothing wrong with you. And if you want to know about stuff like this, go and spend a few years with a mystic in Tibet. And his attitude was, well, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm a Western guy with businesses, I'm an engineer, but I want to know what's going on with me, and if medicine can't tell me, I'll open my own institute. I'll put my money into it, and I'll find out. I'll go as long as it takes until I can find out. Now, he's an amazing man. He passed away in the 90s, I think. But there's so much on YouTube about him. He documented all the experiments, not just with him, by the way. He found about 50 people who could leave their body, so they got involved in the program. And so what I'm saying is, imagine how your life would be and how you would feel if you know through personal experience that you go on when your body dies. Imagine that. And what I'm saying is, if you've got an open mind and you get into people like Bob Monroe and his institute, they actually teach you how to do it. And so my advice would be, approach it with an open mind, research it, and do it. Because once you've done it, you know. And you'll be able to spend the rest of your life knowing it's not the end. When I go, it's not the end. And I think that's such a valuable thing. I used to be terrified of death, I've got to be honest with you. And I've tried to broach the subject with a few people I know, and I got a rather abrasive response from that, which tells me that they're pretty terrified of it too. So I think it's a worthwhile thing. If you're prepared to invest some time in it, don't have to invest any money, invest some time in it, convince yourself that, well, this is happening to lots of people. There's no doubt about that. And then go a step further and see if you can't do it yourself. We all leave our bodies, I believe, every night. So it's not going to be some major thing for a person to ask to leave their body, but to be awake, to be conscious of it and remember it, that's the key. If I can point people in the right direction, I mean, to me, if somebody said to me, you know, there's a way you can actually prove that you go on after death, that you can be separated from your physical body, boy, I'd want to research that. I'd want to research that to the point where I found it's true or it's not. And the only way you can ever find out for sure is to leave your body. I've only just discovered Bob Monroe, and I've known about, you know, spirits and the fact that we never die. I've known about that for decades, but he is a really good guy to follow, because he's not mystic, he's not spiritual in any sense of the word. He's probably the most down-to-earth guy you could ever imagine, but he's an engineer, or he was. And once it happened to him, and it happened to him quite often, he said it took him about a month to realise it wasn't going to kill him. So he was no longer afraid of it, but he said he was terrified at first. It was involuntary. So because he had the money, because he had the curiosity, the desire, he went ahead and studied it purely from a personal point of view. And his content is wonderful. So yeah, it's just basically, we are eternal beings. And that's such a nice feeling to know that. I'm sure there'll be people who see this and go, yep, I know it. And if more people could know that, what a difference it would make to your life. It kind of ties in with a lot. It ties in with a lot. I've always believed in the power of positive thinking.
Yes.
But now science is saying, well, hey, yeah, your consciousness is so powerful, you can manifest your own reality. Words are extremely powerful. Extremely powerful.
And would all this mean, really, in terms of what we were talking about a moment ago, would this mean all of this has to be, if it's a simulation, it has to be pre-programmed?
Yes, well, there must be some entity that's controlling it all. There may well be another entity that's controlling that one.
May I suggest that it's AI from a different time?
That would be very possible.
I mean, that us as humans have advanced the AI so much, and then we,
that would be very, very possible.
Interesting. So, you said something to me recently, something like everything you thought was real is wrong, or everything, something like that. Do you remember?
Yeah. Well, if we're going to talk about that, then I'm sure you'll agree with me on this. What's his name? What's his name?
Bill Werbenick.
No. He's the archaeologist journalist.
Oh, Graham Hancock.
Yes, Graham Hancock.
Yeah. Some call him a pseudoscientist.
Yeah, I subscribe to Hancock's theory, which is, no, we're not 90,000 years old or whatever it is.
Right.
There were very, very advanced civilizations that got wiped out in a cataclysm 12,500 years ago, and they have even found stuff that's older than like 200,000 years. So I think we're not being told the truth about where we come from.
I would say on that there's a couple of things. Number one, talking about Graham Hancock,
He's a wonderful guy.
Yeah,
by
well,
the
he
way.
talks about the Younger Dryas period, and
Yeah.
you know, he's been working on this sort of stuff for decades, and
Yeah.
I'm certainly very interested in what he shows and what he talks about and what he's written about, etc. And now there's been obviously a Netflix
Yeah.
thing, but
Yeah.
I very much subscribe to the fact that civilizations have risen and fallen.
Yes.
And within one generation, 2 generations, those memories and anything else is gone.
Right.
So it's almost like restarting again. So whether we were very advanced or not, I don't know. Perhaps we advanced ourselves in different ways, like you said before, with the third eye or different things.
He
that
gave
we
a
do.
great example, Graham Hancock. He was talking about Stonehenge, and he said, now let's go back to that time. He said, what did you have there at that spot in central England? What did you have? All you had were hunter-gatherers. That's all that was there. That nothing else. So why would a load of hunter-gatherers plan and expend amazing amounts of energy to put up those stones? He believes that they were put there just like the pyramids were by advanced beings, or maybe even just, our ancestors, who could move physical objects with the power of their mind.
Okay.
That kind of makes sense to me.
What I do know, just back to Hancock, just for a moment, one of the things that he does say that definitely rings true is the fact that stuff just keeps getting older. And for many years after he wrote his first couple of books, the critics and archaeologists and everything would say, well, this can't be true because we were hunter-gatherers during this period. And then suddenly, 20, 30 years ago, they discovered Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, and then subsequently other stuff as well, which proves that actually there is something worth looking at there,
there's
mate.
something,
You know?
there's an important thing to remember here when we go talk about the narrative. The narrative. All these honorable professors, all of these experts, they've built their entire careers on this narrative. And for them to suddenly accept, oh, okay, we were totally wrong then. They don't want to do it. They're very reluctant to do it, and so
you can understand that.
of course, exactly. Yes, you can. But like Graham Hancock says, he says, no, we've got to have an open mind, and we've got to look at this. And he believes in Atlantis. I believe in Atlantis. And the more you dig, the more you find.
Certainly the concept of Atlantis. No, he talks about all sorts of stuff. We won't go down the Hancock rabbit hole too much.
Right.
But like he says, stuff just keeps getting older, and the stuff's been found. You can go and watch the series. I won't bang on about it too much, but you can find stuff which changes or will change the narrative with the next generation of archaeologists and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, someone worth checking out.
Now, do you know about quantum entanglement?
Nothing at all.
Oh my God. Okay, well, quantum entanglement blows up another of Einstein's theories. Nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. Well, quantum entanglement proves that to be not true. And I don't know the precise details about this, but a group of scientists managed to put a proton that was quantum entangled with one that they had in their lab on another planet, right? And whenever they did something to the one they've got, the opposite happened the other end, instantaneously. And now, while we're on that subject, I watched a YouTube video, a guy called Richard Vobes. You may not have heard of him. V-O-B-E-S. But he's very much an enlightened spirit type of guy. Well, he had a woman on his channel who heals remotely. And she says, yeah, all I need is a piece of hair or a piece of fingernail from the sick person. And because they're quantum entangled with that person, I do things with what I've got, and it changes their health at the other end. Because they're quantum entangled.
I know you say quantum entanglement, but that also sounds like a bit like voodoo, and it sounds a bit like going back to the old beliefs.
Yeah,
So that would maybe suggest the really old beliefs were left over from another civilization. Possibly.
Einstein called quantum entanglement spooky action from a distance, right? And he couldn't. He was pulling his hair out, which is probably why his hair always looks like that. And he got to a point where he turned around and said, I think it was in 1921, quantum physics is incomplete.
Yeah.
He didn't understand it. He didn't understand quantum entanglement, but now we do. Quantum entanglement apparently is being used to encrypt data. The top countries in the world, they use quantum entanglement to lock up data so it can't be hacked, because you can't get in, apparently.
Okay.
Yeah, quantum entanglement is pretty it's pretty eye-opening stuff, you know, and we've always got to bear this in mind. We can only see approximately 0.5% of what is here. A tiny sliver we see. So I think consciousness is fundamental. Consciousness is fundamental. Now, Hoffman is in the process of carrying out experiments with other physicists and math people to find out what there is outside of space and time. Donald Hoffman was asked as a question, or he pondered the question of what are the chances that we perceive reality as it is? And they did all the math. God knows what that means, but they did all the math, and the answer is precisely zero. There's precisely zero chance that we see reality for what it is.
Okay.
Now, fitness payoffs, right? Fitness payoffs, for example. This is the theory of evolution, yeah? A fitness payoff is when a lion expends a certain amount of energy to get food, and the amount of calories he gets is more than what he spent out. That's a fitness payoff.
Interesting.
Yeah. So if an animal wants to mate with a female, that's a fitness payoff, right? So he says the laws of evolution are tied to fitness payoffs, not reality. Tied to fitness payoffs. And he gives an example of that as being your computer at home, yeah. Let's say you're writing a book, yeah. Well, you've got an icon on your desktop of a book, and you know that when you double click on that, you're into your book. But that book isn't actually that thing there.
Yeah.
If you had to go through all the voltage changes and the digital switches that are involved with opening that file, you'd never be able to do it. Right? So what he's saying is our perception of reality is tied to the fitness payoffs, right? In other words, we know that icon is just an icon, and but it gets us what we want. We don't have to understand the whole thing to get what we want. So he's saying that it's fitness payoffs. It's all about fitness payoffs. Now, he gives a great example. He said sometimes nature can be very strange. In Australia, in the Northern Territories, there's a brown beetle, right? Now, the female of the brown beetle is bigger than the male. It's brown and it's got dimply bits on it, right? But at the same time, there was a popular beer drunk by Australians with a brown bottle with dimples on it. And of course, they throw them away now and again. So what happened? All of the male population were trying to mate with these bottles. They left the females alone. And the reason he said they left the females alone is because the fitness payoff is it's brown, it's got dimples on it, and the bigger it is, the better. So you ended up, and they had to get rid of these bottles in order for this species to not go extinct. We are designed for fitness payoffs. You know, when you grow up like you have, and you've had a child that will take your genes on you, that's a fitness payoff for you. That's a big one. You know, you're looking for fitness payoffs every day with food and things like that. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of subscribe to that. To that. I think, yeah, we don't see reality because we don't need to, and nature is pretty much on the ball. In the same way that when you're listening, when you're in a busy place and somebody is talking to you from across the room, you automatically can filter out all that other background noise because you don't need it. So I think that's the way it is with us. We only see what we need to see to get our fitness payoffs.
How close do you think our reality is to the movie The Matrix?
Very close.
Do you think so?
Yes,
yeah.
I do.
Okay, interesting.
I think that was not a movie, that was a documentary.
Right.
I think. Yeah.
I have heard that point made
Yeah.
before.
Now there are several scientists who boldly make this claim. I can prove to you that there's more chance we live in a simulation than we're not. And they do. They go right out and prove it. They say, okay, well let's assume this, and then we assume this, and then we assume it, and according to their assumptions, which are pretty logic, the chances are we're living in a simulation. The chances are.
Who other are sort of protagonists for this? I mean, you've mentioned Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Dr. Joe Dispenza's a little bit different, yeah.
Okay.
Dr. Joe Dispenza is an amazing guy. He's a scientist. And he has an ability to be able to explain to people the raw, untapped power that they have within themselves. And he does these 5-day workshops, and literally we're talking about stage 4 cancer that disappears overnight. This guy has got some jaw-dropping claims and recorded actual events. And it doesn't work for everyone. I saw him on a video once, and one guy said to him, so why doesn't it work for everybody? He said, well, it's all about belief and understanding. Once you understand that what you think about actually affects your reality, and you realize the power you have to manifest your life to be the way you want it, it's a game changer. And those that get it, they have an amazing life transforming experience, and they're never the same after that. So yeah, Dr. Joe is an amazing guy, without a doubt. But it's pretty radical stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, as we said earlier, that, you know, it could be that everything that you think you knew was wrong. Well, if we're going back to like the very core of what reality is,
yeah,
and our background and our history,
yeah,
then you could very well turn around, as far as I'm concerned, and say, yeah, everything I was taught was a lie. Why is it that in the UK you are not allowed by law to ingest a mind-altering substance? Why is that, do you think? I think it's because they don't want us to know what we are,
right,
and they'll do everything in their power to stop us finding out what we are.
What do you mean by that in terms of the mind-altering?
Discovering our spirituality, discovering the latent talents, abilities that we all have within us. You know, the lump on my arm is an example. I did that.
But how does that manifest itself with hallucinogenics? Do they help?
It's a door opener. It's a door opener.
Because I must admit, I watched something, I think it was Mike Tyson a while back, and he was talking about the toad.
Right.
And he did talk about going into kind of a different
your ego gets
section
destroyed.
Of reality or something. Yeah. So is that what you mean? That's
yeah, that's what I mean. And one good thing that's coming up now is one of the big hospitals in London. They've got 2 expert guys who are now running clinical tests for people using cybacillin, you know, magic mushrooms,
yeah,
and DMT, and they're getting awesome results for people with depression, you know, people with personality disorders.
Or normal doses?
Controlled doses,
right,
controlled doses. Yeah, I think they give them 3 doses. The first one's quite small, the second one's the big one, and the third one is another small one, and it's done in the company of these professionals in the right atmosphere, and the results they get are astounding. So I think, yeah, psychedelics open a door. I do believe that.
Mentally or to our
Spiritually.
Also, but
Pineal
do they
gland.
open a door to our perception of reality?
Yes,
you think?
yes,
Yeah?
I think so. Yes, that would be that would be a good way to put it. Yes, they open up our perception of reality.
So what you're saying really, in one way as well, we're so focused on the other things and we're looking for those fitness goals and that we probably need hallucinogenics or something to take a moment to step back out of that reality and have a look, or to
If you
understand
look,
it a bit more.
if
I
you
don't
look
know.
at any culture in the world, you'll find that a very small percentage of them take psychedelics, and they are like witch doctors. Not everybody does it, but certain people do in the community. And when somebody's got something wrong with them, they'll go to see this guy.
So you mentioned a guy earlier that really does divide opinion. A lot of people still today will call him an absolute lunatic,
Right.
and other people follow him completely and utterly. Other people will take notice every now and then.
Right.
I know you like the dude, David Icke.
Okay.
How do some of his ideas
Well,
relate to this?
if you look at David Icke and you realise that to come out with what he came out with when he did that, I mean, he put up with so much abuse, but that made him a stronger person for it. Now, if you look at all the things he said over the years, have they come true? Many of them have. Many of them have. Now, Icke will always say one thing. He'll say this many, many times. At the end of the day, it's all about love. Right? Now, all of the spiritual people, all of the spiritual gurus, call them whatever you like, the people who are into the spiritual awakening, they all say that too. It's all about love. At the end of the day, it's all about love. So I have a bold claim, and it works for me because I practice this. My bold claim is this: if you love everybody and everything, yeah, and you're filled with kindness and compassion, you will have a wonderful life. You will have a wonderful life. For me, that's a rock solid statement right there.
Do you believe by displaying these things you can change your reality?
Absolutely you
perception?
can.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know why?
Why?
Because when I look at the double split experiment, it's a different outcome to when I didn't look at it. So that proves to me that my conscious mind can affect outcomes in this physical world. That's proof for you right there. Yeah. And now that can't be argued against. I've never met anyone who's turned around and said, well, the double slit experiment doesn't prove that consciousness alters outcomes. It does prove exactly that.
And if you disagree with that, please feel free to leave a comment, and Paul will be happy
Yes.
to debate you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I possibly would, yeah. But no, I don't think there are any serious scientists alive today that would dispute that statement, that human consciousness affects outcomes of experiments. If it can affect the outcome of an experiment, then it can affect reality. And for me, that's the core. But I've always believed that. I just didn't have a label for it. And the science never took you there. But now the science is taking you there. You know, the science is showing, well, hey, hang on a minute. Time and space is not fundamental, but the human consciousness is. Or consciousness is.
Would you say this is another one of these concepts that many things start off as labelled as pseudoscience? don't
Right,
they? But
yes,
some
they
of them
do.
become science or become reality later. Right?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, there are going to be a few diehards who cannot move away from their stance that the brain creates your mind. Your conscious experiences are just a result of neurons firing in your brain. You know, the taste of strawberries, you know, the feeling when you eat something spicy or whatever it is. That's just the product of a working brain. Well, I think that's been proven to be untrue now. I think that's been proven to be untrue.
Right, okay.
There are so many examples of people who've left their body while under general anaesthetic. Yeah, so they're all hooked up to a machine, and they've witnessed something that happened across the corridor in another room.
You've done that before, haven't you?
No, I haven't, but,
No.
but people have.
But you have left your body before.
I've left my body twice. Yeah. Yeah.
Describe briefly the most interesting one out of the two.
The first one was very, very quick. I was riding a motocross motorcycle in Crete, going across the hills, the mountains, 5 o'clock in the morning, and there was some gravel on the road, and my front wheel hit the gravel, and I just went bang. And as soon as I hit the ground, I'm looking down, and there's me, laying on the ground, and there's the bike, and I can hear the engine revving because it was stuck open on full throttle. I can see the white smoke, and I thought to myself, wow, I'm outside of myself looking in, and then boom, I'm back. Broken collarbone and a couple of ribs, I think it was. The second time was a lot longer, and that was, I just sat in a room, looked at a picture on the wall. Now I have to say that I'd been taking some speed, so I hadn't been sleeping and I hadn't been eating. Now you can ask all these spiritual people, the astral travelers, those that can leave their body at will, going without sleep and going without food is a big plus if you want to do that. And so I don't know how long it lasted. It might have lasted 15-20 minutes. I went all around the house from the outside. I went through walls.
But were you asleep? Were you in a hospital? Or?
No, I was sat in the living room of my apartment, and I was staring at a wall. And I remember when I came back, I'm rigid on the armchair like that. And when I came back, my t-shirt was absolutely soaking because I had tears all the time, because your body will always look after you. And so if you don't blink, your eyes will dry up. And so tears had been flowing, but not tears of sadness or joy, just the tear glands work when you don't blink. That's what they do. That was a profound experience for me, and that did it for me. I had no fear of death from that day on. Lost totally my fear of death. And it's hard to explain. It's not an hallucination. I absolutely know that. If you've experienced it, nobody can tell you otherwise that what didn't happen. It's either you've either experienced it or you haven't. I've been fortunate to experience it, so I don't have any fear of death whatsoever. Yeah.
How long ago was that? How old were you?
I was 22 the first time, and I was 28, 27 the second time.
Some would say, Paul, you've lived the last 55 years with reckless abandon because you've had that feeling. You're not scared of death.
That's
mate.
right. That's got something to do with it.
Yeah.
I have realised that. Yeah, that's got something to do with it. That's why I got off a bus in the middle of the desert, and things like that. Yeah. I have no fear of death, and that's wonderful for me. Really, really wonderful.
So, apart from Hoffman, if there's anybody here watching this and they think, I'd quite like to have a look at that, but it's a huge rabbit hole, where do I start? What would you have a look at? And
okay,
people or
I'd
subjects?
start. Let's take it a step at the time. Yeah. Before we move on to your conscious mind can create your own reality. Let's establish before that your body is just a vehicle, and you have a spirit, and that spirit lives on. Let's just focus on that. Yeah.
Okay.
So I would say to people, start searching for YouTube videos of recorded, reputable cases of reincarnation. Start with that. Yeah. Start looking at that, and you should reach a point where you say to yourself, well, there's no doubt in my mind now then. And if we can establish the fact that you've been here thousands of times, and this is just another one of those times where you're experiencing your life from that little perception that you have, and once this life is over, you'll go on to somewhere else, and you'll come back here and probably go through another lifetime, and that'll keep going because we're eternal beings of light. So I would say, if we can get to that point, if you can get to that point where you say to yourself, now there's so much evidence that there's life after death, and that you can leave your body, I've got to go with that. Because I think we've got to take this in stages. You can't just say to somebody, look, you can manifest your own reality. We need to take this step by step. And it's this one video that I would recommend somebody to watch about reincarnation. And the fact that we live on. There was one guy, I'll find it and give you the link. There was one guy, and he'd spent his whole life sitting with dead people who were dying. More than 10,000 people he sat with as they died. From all over the world, different cultures, different languages, different beliefs, and the outcomes were all the same, identical. People, loved ones arriving the day before, telling them as well that it's tomorrow, you know, and he's witnessed all this, and he said it can't be a coincidence, you know. I've got people from Mongolia having the same experiences as people from New York, you know. The evidence is there. The evidence is there. It's overwhelming. Overwhelming. And that answers a few questions for me. You know, when I was young, I used to think to myself, why is it that some people are so incredibly smart and other people are so incredibly dumb? Well, the answer to that is the smart one's probably been here 5 times as many as the other guy. He's further down his journey of learning, and therefore he has the inbuilt knowledge.
Wow, I must have been here 800,000 times then.
Probably. Me too. But I would like to think that this particular lifetime, it was like a big awakening for me, maybe even an enlightenment, because I've certainly come a long way from my Christian days at school.
What would you like to come back? Who would you like to come back as, mate? Would you come back as a human? Do you believe that a spirit, when you talk about spirit, that can be transferred between living beings or just between humans?
All living beings, I believe.
So, what would you like to come back as? Human being? If so, who and where?
Okay.
Or would it be something else?
I'll tell you a little story before I answer that.
Yep.
In the 1930s, there was an English aristocrat woman on a train going through India with a 7-year-old son. You know, they're very nicely dressed and they're in a private carriage, but there's an old monk sitting by the window across from them. And as the train is coming near a station, it has to slow down. And the little boy looks out the window, and there's a boy about the same age as him with all this dried hay on his back. You know, and he's covered in sweat. And he looks at the boy on the train and he waves and smiles. And the mother says, you see how lucky you are? And the monk, he doesn't even lift his head. He says, no, boy, he's the lucky one. Adversity builds character. Just off the top of my head, I'd like to be the son of a professional snooker player who's retired and he's got his own snooker club now, so that I could start playing at the age of 4 and see how close I could get to Ronnie O'Sullivan winning 7 world titles. Yes. Yeah.
Bless you. You love your snooker,
and
mate.
if that happened to me, I probably wouldn't remember this lifetime, but I'd have this innate desire to play snooker, and I wouldn't know where it comes from. But yeah, snooker is a game that I'm totally hooked on. So yeah, I'd like to come back as a boy or a girl whose father owns a snooker hall and gets me into it as soon as I can walk. That would be great.